Testified this morning before the joint legislative hearing investigating how the executive budget proposal would impact local governments. Peter Baines is the executive director of the New York Conference of Mayors, and then across the table we have Jeffrey Haber. He is the executive director of the Association of Towns. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
It is unfortunately not happy circumstances per se, but if you would just, if you want to start, you want to give like a brief overview of what it is you said. You're not looking for a restoration of money at this point.
Well, in a perfect world, we'd like to see the 2%
Right.
cut in AIM aid restored, but we acknowledge that the governor, in a lot of competing interests and limited resources, treated local governments very well. 2%, we'd prefer no cut, but 2% is a lot better than 10% or greater, which is what we feared. So we acknowledge that. Still, though, it's going to be very difficult for our members, especially the larger cities, to handle that 2% cut. They're going to do their best, they're going to manage, but it's still going to be a challenge. But again, it could have been much worse.
Okay. Mr. Haber?
I think the governor did a tremendous job, and he has a difficult job in front of him. And I agree with Peter that it could have been much worse for us. I think the key is mandate relief. And I liked what the governor said in his budget presentation, where he said everyone has to chip in to get the state out of this position that it's in, and a lot of those people that have not borne the pain of previous years will have to this year. And in my testimony this morning, I raised that issue, that local governments have taken a hit almost for the last 30 years every time there was a budget crisis. A lot of other, as the governor likes to call them, special interests have not. And this year, everyone is going to have to bear the pain if we are to get out of this.
The issue of what we're talking about is aid to municipalities generally. That's what the 2% cut is that you referenced. It's coming to cover the fact that the state gives, not Medicaid obviously, but there are so many mandated services that local governments have to provide. I mean, what if the idea is that someday you wouldn't receive it at all?
Well, I mean, that is a fear. Back in the early 90s, we lost half of it, and there was the fear this year that we were going to lose a large portion of the remaining.
And you never got back up to that same.
We never got back up to that in total, but the larger cities did get significant restorations, but we've never gotten back to where we really need to be. And it's meant to acknowledge that local governments have limited resources. They have the property tax, that's about it, while the state has lots of broadly based revenues. So AIM, what used to be known as revenue sharing, the idea was the state will collect its revenue that's generated in large part by what local governments do and the services they provide, and we'll share it back with local governments for property tax relief. It's really the first property tax relief program in New York, not the STAR program. The revenue sharing program, or AIM, is. That's why it's key, while they're talking about property tax relief, that the legislature not forget about AIM as a property tax relief tool.
I want to get to the property tax question, but I also want to get to this question of consolidation. I mean, Governor Cuomo, even when he was Attorney General, was pushing the issue of consolidation. And this is something that I actually happen to have a personal interest in because my father, it's like a pet project of my father's, and I've heard a lot about it for like 10 years at the breakfast table. It is a problem politically speaking because elected officials don't love the idea of giving up any power. I mean, if you in fact consolidate whole governments, it's somebody has to lose sooner or later, don't they?
Well, I think you have to take a hard look at what consolidation really achieves. We did a study when the consolidation movement came around under Governor Spitzer. And in that study, it was proven that the smaller the size of the government, the more efficient the delivery of services. And if you look around the country at places where they tried regionalism, the bigger the government, the more expensive. The rising tide floats all boats. The salaries go higher to the highest level. The vacation, the benefits all go to the higher level, to the highest level.
Sure.
And with the smaller local governments that deliver the services, down to I think it was 1,000 people in a town or someplace, the cost of delivering those services is more efficient than in a large government.
Do you think, though, Peter, is there room for, because the government wants to incentivize consolidation. He pushed it when he was AG. Do you think there's room for, or even a willingness to do that?
I think there's a willingness. I think a lot of our members, our village members, are looking at it, and I think they've always looked at it. And it's good that the state is focusing on incentivizing that. But really, that's just tinkering around the edges. 2% of all the property taxes collected in the state come from village governments. They're really the only ones under law right now that can consolidate. So let's get to the real heart of the matter, which is the labor-related mandates that are on our cities, counties, large towns, those that have police and fire departments. That's what's generating high property taxes.
Yeah.
Plus the fact, let's not overlook the fact that at least 33% of the real property in New York State is tax exempt. And I think some years ago, Senator Bonasek and Senator Little and others put forth a bill to go back and reevaluate property tax exemptions.
But don't some of those properties do payment in lieu of taxes? I know some of them do.
I'm not talking about IDAs. I'm talking about, like, I had a conversation with an assemblywoman today that told me that a Boy Scout group actually located in New Jersey has a 600 or 700 acre camp.
Yep, I know about this one.
Right.
Yep.
And this property is exempt. Now, no one objects to the fact that a church, a synagogue, whatever, is tax exempt, and the rectory that goes along with it. But there has to be a line as to where property tax exemptions are drawn.
I've had county officials here talking to me about their desire to have more power in negotiating with their own contracted employees. Is this something that towns and cities also want?
Oh, that's a huge issue for us. All cities have paid police, paid fire. There are laws in New York in the Taylor Law that dictate how negotiations take place, especially with police and fire unions, and they put the employers, really the taxpayers, at a serious disadvantage. And we put out a report called "You Can't Cap What You Can't Control" that I have conveniently in front of me here. And we have a whole series of recommendations that we think would bring fairness to that process, that negotiating process, so that union contracts at the municipal level are more affordable for taxpayers.
All right, let us talk about the cap at this point. I mean, part of the problem with the budget, and I feel like I almost feel like a broken record, and so I'm sorry, but I feel like there are a lot of moving parts and a lot of unknowns in this budget, and it's probably done by design because it keeps people a little bit off kilter. It makes it more difficult to advocate or lobby for something that you're not sure what it's going to look like at the end. So we have the Medicaid piece is still out there, the prison closure piece is still out there, the mandate relief piece, which is what you guys really care about, probably is still out there. Are you hopeful that if there were one or two things that this mandate relief task force could actually get to first, what would the top two desires be?
Well, I think from our aspect, you know, the Wicks law, say, for example.
Right.
This drives up the cost of construction probably 30% in municipalities. The question really is, why should municipalities, who are really the private taxpayers, have to be subject to a system that the regular world is not subject to? And so we have gone so far in negotiations over the Wicks laws in previous years as to agree that if a GC gets a general contractor, gets bids from subcontractors, the problem was they would go back after they won the contract and then beat up the subs.
Sure. And
that's what the Wicks law was designed to prevent. We have agreed that you can hold those subs at the bid level that they gave. That would be illegal to go back and do that. The Wicks law is just something that has, I think, outlived its time. And prevailing wage is another. Prevailing wage.
The unions are going to kill you.
This goes back to my original statement. They have to feel some pain too, as well as the rest of us. Now, prevailing wage is in the Constitution, I believe, and as a constitutional issue, it says it has to be a wage concurrent with the area. It doesn't specifically say union wages. But we had an incident years ago when we were gathering data, where in Delaware County, I think it was, in a fairly rural area, where the union house that the wages were derived from were a local in New Jersey. And that kind of stuff, you know, there has to be some help there to drive these costs down.
Okay, your top wish list for mandate relief.
The top two, the two 800-pound gorillas that we have to take care of are pensions and health insurance.
Because they're small little things that
They're
I'm
small
sure we're
little
going to get
things
right
that
to.
everybody will support.
Correct.
But Liz, they have to be tackled, or we're never going to control property
Right.
taxes. We've shown the tax cap in 3 years. If there was a tax cap, every city in this state, every penny they collect in property taxes would go to pensions and health insurance and nothing else if we don't control those costs.
Okay, well, we are unfortunately out of time. I want to thank you guys both. I'm sure that we're going to be talking about this a lot more. We already have been. Peter Baines, thank you. Jeff Haber,
you,
thank you
Liz.
very
Thank
much
you,
for
Liz.
being here. I appreciate your time.